This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether your mom is into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried-and-true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now, everything at Movement is up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale. A watch is a gift that celebrates all the time you spent with Mom. And a Movement watch is even more than that. Movement uses industry-leading materials for their fresh, modern watch designs, from technically complex ceramics to vintage-inspired style, all for an incredible value your wrist and wallet will both love. And with one-size-fits-all convenience and fast free shipping and returns, it's a stress-free shopping experience. Save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with Movement. Get up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale at mvmt.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at mvmt.com.
We made this.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Tony Black, and this is I Want to Believe Minute, where we unpick the second X-Files movie 1 minute at a time. Today, helping me explore minute 7, running from approximately 6 minutes in, with Scully talking to young Christian and his parents, through to 6 minutes 59 as Scully enters Mulder's house, is writer and podcaster Adam Chamberlain. Back again. Adam, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be back.
It's great to have you back. And last episode, obviously, you gave us a little bit of a flavour for what you thought of I Want to Believe and your history with it. So I encourage anyone to go back and listen to that if you haven't already. So we're going to plough on and talk about minute 7 in this episode. And as Scully is talking to Christian, she then gets interrupted by the FBI one of the FBI representatives in this film, Agent Mosley Drummy, who is played by Xhibit, the rapper. I'm going to take it that you're a big Xhibit fan, Adam. Is that correct?
I can't claim to be that familiar with Xhibit's other work, if I'm being brutally honest.
Oh, you're disappointed, Adam.
I know. Sorry about that. But Chris Carter's not lost his knack for a great character names, has he? For his agents.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mosley Drummy. Yeah,
Mosley Drummy. What a name!
Now, do you know where he got that? I don't know the answer to this. I'm asking you speculatively. Have you come across where he got that name from, by any chance?
I haven't, I'm afraid, and I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah,
I'm sure a tale lies in that. That's not the sort of name you just come up with off the cuff, is it?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Xhibit has got a little bit of a. He's quite a well-known rapper, working since the mid-90s. I am not at all familiar with his work. I won't lie at all. There are probably people out there listening to this who will be. All right, so I'm sure he's very good at what he does. It's not at all my area of expertise. But around a year before he gets cast in this, he starts putting his name out there to get some movie roles. So he pops up in. This is one hell of an early role to get, but he pops up in Werner Herzog's remake of Bad Lieutenant, with Nicolas Cage. Wow. Now, I don't know if you've seen that film, Adam, but it's a bit of a ride.
Oh, right. It's a Nicolas Cage film. Of course it is. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And Werner Herzog directing. Imagine him being one of the first directors you had. Wow. I mean, he's a guy. He said that he'd loved X-Files for years. He used to watch The Twilight Zone as a child, so he was very, very interested in that kind of thing, science fiction, etc. And he admired Chris Carter. So when he was called into audition to this and put his name forward, he was really keen to do it by the sound of it. And he seems to have a lot of goodwill towards being in that film and everything, which is nice, because you just wouldn't. People get associated with one thing, don't they? And a particular corner. You wouldn't necessarily think you might have thought this was just a job for him, but actually it seems like he really loved the X-Files, which is nice.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, it's nice to hear.
apparently he was nervous auditioning because of the pedigree, so he dressed up as an FBI agent for the audition. So he actually
he put on a suit, you mean?
Yeah. He had a suit, he had a trench coat, he had a tie. Okay. He said the only thing I was missing was a gun and a badge. And,
probably just as well he didn't bring those.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And Chris Carter was apparently very impressed with this, so that part helped sell it, get him the part. I mean, I would imagine, Adam, that the thought process of casting someone like Xhibit was partly down to, I mean, a certain box office intention here, in that they wanted to get some people in for this movie who were known to different, audiences, to try and dress people in. That would be my guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. I think Chris Carter says he liked his intensity as well, right? That he brought to the role as well. So perhaps there was something about that in terms of how he presented himself. But it makes sense. Yeah. Broadening the appeal of the movie.
Let's tackle this elephant in the room right now, right? Although it sort of maybe comes up a little bit later. But should this have been John Doggett?
I don't know. I think. I mean, I love John Doggett and Monica Reyes for that matter. I think. I have to wonder if it was John Doggett and his experience that arguably would therefore have had on the X-Files himself to that point, would he have needed to go in search of Fox Mulder at this point? I guess would be the point. So I wonder. I think there's a lot of I'll say baggage. Well, I guess there is a lot of baggage, and perhaps connective tissue to the truth that you have to sort of fill in if you bring John Doggett into this movie, and perhaps they didn't want that. They just wanted to focus in on this sort of contained story they were telling, and therefore it's perhaps easier to introduce a new character to do this. I love John Doggett. I miss John Doggett, but I guess that's perhaps at least part of the thinking as to why not.
I think that's probably quite fair, isn't it? Really, I think you'd have to have rewritten things, fairly substantially, to be honest. And equally, you could have in theory had Reyes and Annabeth Gish in the Dakota Whitney role in a way as well. You could have had them both doing that, but whether they'd have killed Reyes off in that way, I mean, what a death. I mean, she gets a hell of a death without going too much ahead of myself, but Amanda Peet, that's a hell of a death.
She does.
But yeah, that undoubtedly would have been done very differently. So, it's a what if, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I guess there's ways of doing it. And I have to say, I always loved seeing, or the little time we got to see it, Doggett and Mulder on screen together were fantastic. So perhaps there were ways of doing it. But I'm guessing, but as to what the reasons were for not doing that.
And I think Drummy's a fairly decent character, really. He's not in a ton of the film, really, and a lot of the time he feels like he's quite exposition-y, and he's all part of just getting them from A to B and stuff. But he's, I think Xhibit does a decent job, really. He's just a very, quite solid FBI guy, really, isn't he? Yeah,
absolutely, quite serviceable in the role. Like you say, he doesn't have a ton to do or a ton of sort of development as such, but yeah, he's perfectly serviceable in the role, I would say.
Yeah, and Xhibit does a decent job. So. Fair play to him, because obviously this is his one and only. He doesn't get come back for the revival or anything, so this is his one and only appearance. But people will come back to Drummy much later in the film and talk a bit more about him. But Scully's not so sure though straight away. He comes to her and he's saying, "I'm looking for Fox Mulder," and she's dubious until he basically says, it could save an agent's life. But just on Xhibit though, Carter says in the commentary that he thinks the film will do loads for Xhibit's career going forward. I think had Xhibit been in the other film that came out this weekend, maybe that would have been the case.
Yes, maybe so.
But I don't really think that happens, unfortunately. And I've got nothing against Xhibit, but I think he's probably still best known for Pimp My Ride on MTV.
Right. Yes.
Which again, I'm not super familiar with. You'll be surprised to hear. But yeah, he seems to be still doing well in what he does, so there you go. Yeah, Scully's fairly dismissive of him. I suppose that makes sense, Adam, doesn't it, really, given the history that obviously she has with the FBI?
Yeah, and it establishes that. It establishes where she still stands in respect to that history. Makes complete sense for a character, and also that being protective of Mulder as well, of course. But also it makes complete sense that the moment they talk about potentially saving the life of an agent, that would be what hooks her.
Yeah, makes sense, absolutely. So that's the impetus to get her to go and find Mulder, and that's essentially the rest of the minute. Really, is her driving through the countryside, essentially to Mulder's very desolate house. Really, he's living really out in the sticks here, isn't he, compared to where he used to live in the city.
He is, yes. So again, the script says it's a desolate road to an unremarkable house. It's clear that he wants to be out of the way and not easy to find and what have you. And quite a contrast that is demonstrated through Scully taking that journey.
Does this make sense after the truth that this is what he'd do? Because the suggestion is that he's basically holed up there for quite a while now, and that he's just basically barricaded himself in this. It's got a gate on there that she has to open, and it's up a driveway, and I mean, after the truth, yeah. Does it make sense he'd just go down and stay in one place?
Well, I guess, I don't know, in my mind, maybe there is a period where they were truly on the run, moving around, and then as the dust settled, it's just a case of coming somewhere where you're enough out of the way. I think there's comments later on there where there's a suggestion that actually they just don't care about him anymore. He's just an irrelevance more than anything else. But so I suppose in that context, it makes sense. Yeah. But there's a period of time, isn't there, that we get to fill in the gaps of, and indeed fill in the gaps for Doggett and Reyes. I think one of the other reasons, perhaps for going back to the point about Doggett and Reyes not being in this movie, given that there was, at the time this film was made, hopefully an opportunity to tell more stories about the X-Files, it gives you that creative freedom to maybe go back and fill that in those years and actually tell the story of those characters. Obviously that hasn't quite happened, but it leaves, as it is, it's left to our imagination what may have transpired within those years. Yeah.
It feels like maybe had this been made closer to where we are now, you would have had more tie-in media do this kind of stuff as well. Like if you think of how, in terms of Star Trek, to use that as an example, they have entire comic runs that are set between some of those movies or are set around particular TV shows that explain certain bits and bobs. And they're not necessarily canon, but they are. Yeah. They fill in gaps, don't they? Whereas at this point, there's nothing like that for the X-Files.
There's nothing. But you're right. Yeah, I think if this were being made today, you're absolutely right. They would use that tie-in media. But as it is, we get to make up our own stories, which is also a lot of fun.
That is fun, actually. Yeah, which sometimes are more enjoyable themselves. I think the tie-in media. I think you're a particular fan of the score, aren't you? Through this minute, generally, that Mark Snow puts out there.
I am. I think it's especially in the house. The score there is beautiful, and I think this is one of Mark Snow's best scores. Period for this movie. I absolutely love the soundtrack to this. It's something I often put on if I am writing or something. Actually, I often return to this score and have it on in the background. So one of my favourites.
It is nice. Better than Fight the Future, or different? Would you say?
Different, I think, because I love Fight the Future as a movie too, but I guess I think of that more in terms of the big set pieces, and therefore the music is also that bit more bombastic in places too. So I think I love both movies, both soundtracks. This is probably the one I return to more, but that's just more about suiting me to have something that's less bombastic on as background music, I think.
I think that's fair. It's a bit more mood, isn't it? This score?
Yes,
it's it definitely has a different vibe to it, which makes complete sense. The movie has a very different vibe, so that makes sense. I think he reuses a few motifs actually from Fight the Future at various points.
Right, I think you're right. Yeah.
But I defer to people who will have a bit more knowledge of that than me. But I'm pretty sure. But he did that in the show, didn't he? He did that during the 6th, 7th seasons. There was a lot of Fight the Future music dripped in. So I'm sure that's the case here. But yeah, they were shooting the scenes at Mulder's house, outside Mulder's house, very early in the morning at points, and they were having to import snow near where he lives. Because apparently it had snowed quite heavily. It had then thawed, So when they were scouting it had snowed, and then by the time they got there, it had all gone. So they had to import some snow in and do that.
I love that wintry mood to this movie as well, I have to say, the presence of snow throughout. But yes, one thing I feel contractually obliged to mention about this house is that it is painted yellow. So it's not so clear in this minute as it is actually later on, but
right.
Again, whether that's accident or not, whether it was given a lick of paint, whether it happened to be a yellow house, whether it's a complete coincidence in terms of that link with Millennium, I don't know, but it stood out for me when I first saw it, and stuck in my head.
I'm just always inclined, Adam, to think that nothing's coincidental with
exactly
the way they make things. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was a little nod.
Purposeful choice. Yeah.
Mulder having his Frank Black moment, in his yellow house, a very different yellow house. But no, it's quite a nice house, even though it's quite desolate. It was the interior though. When Scully goes in, that was a set in Vancouver, outside of Vancouver. And so different from obviously where they filmed it, which is obviously common, to production. So they built that on a set, and it's I don't know. I mean, you don't see a lot of it when Scully walks in. The shades are drawn. It's meant to presumably be like afternoon, potentially in the day, but it has a very dusky feel in there, doesn't it? As soon as you see it, it's very. I suppose in some ways it's a bit like his flat used to be. Really, in some way, it's like he's tried to recreate that vibe in a country house, I guess. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
But there's I wondered if there was like a little woman's touch. There's some candles I can see at one point. So I don't know if
there
Scully's
are
touch
quite
is
prominently
there.
on the table. There's a sense of that. I wasn't sure, and perhaps this is more relevant to the next minute, how much time she spends here. But yes, I think you're right to pull up on that there was that sense that it's mostly Mulder's clutter and so on, but there's some of Scully's influence there too. I think you're right.
It could be. Yeah, maybe we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that in the next minute, because as Scully walks in, that's basically where our minute ends, and we're getting closer to Mulder's big introduction, which is coming very soon. I think that's in fact coming in the next minute. So we'll be back very, very soon, Adam and I, to talk you through that and get into a little bit more of this film. So do join us then, and until we do return to talk about minute 8, thanks for listening, and remember, trust no one.
Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether mom's into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried-and-true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now, you can save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with up to 50% off site-wide during Movement's Mother's Day sale at MVMT.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at MVMT.com.